The gun store clerk rolled his eyes when the old woman asked to see their premium ammunition. He figured she didn't know a .22 from a .50 caliber. Then she reached for her wallet, and he saw it, a small purple heart tattoo on her wrist. His smirk disappeared instantly. He had no idea he was looking at a woman who earned that medal under enemy fire in Fallujah. What happens when someone judges you by your appearance, never knowing the battles you've fought or the sacrifices you've made? Rebecca Torres was about to remind a room full of strangers that heroes don't always wear uniforms, and sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we dive into this powerful story of respect, sacrifice, and hidden courage, tell us in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe stories of unrecognized heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us share them with the world. Davidson's gun store sat on the corner of Main Street in Cedar Falls, Iowa, a modest shop that served hunters, collectors, and weekend shooting enthusiasts. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the front windows, illuminating rows of rifles and display cases filled with ammunition. Behind the counter stood Tyler Mitchell, 23 years old, fresh out of college, and working at the gun shop while figuring out his next career move. Tyler had grown up around firearms. His father was an avid hunter, but he'd never served in the military. To him, the store was just a job, and customers were just customers. Rebecca Torres pushed through the glass door at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that seemed no different from any other. She was 68 years old, wearing a beige cardigan, comfortable walking shoes, and carrying a worn leather purse her daughter had given her for Mother's Day 5 years earlier. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she moved with the careful, measured steps of someone who had learned to navigate the world quietly. To Tyler, she looked like every other elderly woman who wandered into the store lost, confused, or looking for someone to help them with a purchase they didn't understand. Tyler glanced up from his phone where he'd been scrolling through social media posts from friends who were out enjoying their afternoon off. He barely registered Rebecca's presence as she approached the counter, assuming she was either looking for directions or had wandered in by mistake. "Can I help you?" Tyler asked, his tone polite but distracted, his eyes already drifting back to his phone screen. Rebecca stood at the counter for a moment, taking in the displays of ammunition, the tactical gear hanging on the walls, and the young man who seemed more interested in his device than his customers. She'd seen that look before, the dismissive glance that categorized her as irrelevant before she'd even spoken. "I'd like to see your premium rifle ammunition," Rebecca said quietly, her voice steady and clear. Tyler looked up again, this time really seeing her. An elderly woman asking about premium ammunition? He assumed she was confused, maybe shopping for a husband or son who had sent her in with unclear instructions. "Ma'am," Tyler said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone people use when they think they're being helpful, "rifle ammunition comes in a lot of different calibers. Do you know what kind of gun you're buying for?" Rebecca studied Tyler's face, recognizing the condescending smile she'd encountered countless times over the years. The assumption that age and gender automatically meant ignorance. The presumption that she couldn't possibly understand firearms or know what she was looking for. "I need .308 Winchester, match grade," Rebecca replied calmly. "Preferably 168 grain, boat tail hollow point." Tyler blinked, surprised by the specificity of her request. Most customers who came in asking for ammunition said things like "bullets for my hunting rifle" or "the kind that goes in a deer gun." This woman was using precise technical terminology, but instead of adjusting his attitude, Tyler doubled down on his assumptions. Maybe she'd memorized the specifications someone else had written down for her. "Ma'am, that's some pretty expensive ammunition," Tyler said, his tone now bordering on dismissive. "Are you sure that's what you need? Because match grade .308 is really meant for precision shooting, and it costs about 3 times what regular hunting ammo costs." Two other customers in the store, both middle-aged men browsing the rifle selection, had started to notice the conversation. One of them, wearing a camouflage cap and hunting jacket, glanced over with mild interest. Rebecca felt the familiar weight of being underestimated. She'd experienced it in the military, where young soldiers had initially questioned her presence in combat zones. She'd faced it in civilian life, where her age and appearance led people to dismiss her capabilities. "I understand the cost," Rebecca said, her voice remaining even. "I need match-grade ammunition for precision work." Tyler actually chuckled, a sound that carried clearly through the small store. The two browsing customers turned to look more directly at the conversation unfolding at the counter. "Precision work?" Tyler repeated, barely containing his amusement. "Ma'am, with all due respect, match-grade ammunition is for serious competitive shooters and, well, professionals. It's not really something most people need for backyard target practice." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable now. Tyler had concluded that this elderly woman was either confused, delusional, or trying to impress someone. He'd seen it before, people who watched too many action movies and thought they needed the most expensive equipment for casual shooting. Rebecca stood silent for a moment, feeling the weight of the assumptions being made about her. She thought about the easier path, explaining that she was a retired service member, mentioning her background, or simply asking to speak to a manager. But something about Tyler's dismissive attitude triggered a deeper response. This wasn't just about buying ammunition. This was about respect, about the dangerous habit of judging people based on appearance alone, and about the lessons that could only be learned through direct experience. "May I see your selection?" Rebecca asked calmly, ignoring the implied insult in Tyler's response. Tyler shrugged, figuring he'd humor her for a few minutes before she balked at the prices and left empty-handed. He walked to the ammunition display and began pointing out various boxes, his explanations filled with the kind of exaggerated simplicity usually reserved for children. "Now, this here is your basic .308, Tyler said, holding up a box of standard hunting ammunition. "This is what most people actually need for deer hunting or basic target shooting. It's about $15 a box." He moved to a more expensive selection. "This is match grade, like you asked for, but it's $45 a box, and honestly, unless you're shooting competitively or you're some kind of expert marksman, you probably won't notice the difference." The emphasis Tyler placed on expert marksman made it clear he found the idea of this elderly woman being anything approaching an expert to be absurd. Rebecca listened to the explanation without interruption, her expression remaining neutral despite the growing irritation she felt at being talked down to like a child who didn't understand the value of money or the purpose of ammunition. "I'll take 4 boxes of the match grade," Rebecca said when Tyler finished his condescending presentation. Tyler paused, genuinely surprised. "Ma'am, that's almost $200 worth of ammunition. Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Rebecca replied. Tyler glanced toward the two customers who were now openly watching the interaction. One of them, the man in the camouflage cap, had moved closer to the counter. Tyler seemed to be playing to an audience now, his skepticism becoming more pronounced. "Okay," Tyler said slowly, "but I have to ask, what exactly are you planning to do with match-grade ammunition that costs $45 a box?" It was a question that crossed the line from professional inquiry to personal interrogation. Rebecca recognized the challenge in Tyler's voice, the implication that she owed him an explanation for her purchase. "Target practice," Rebecca answered simply. Tyler's smirk returned. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, you could get the same target practice with ammunition that costs a third as much. Unless you're shooting at targets from like 1,000 yards away or something." The comment was meant to be dismissive, an example so extreme that it highlighted what Tyler saw as the absurdity of her purchase. He had no idea that Rebecca had, in fact, made successful shots from much greater distances under far more challenging conditions. "The ammunition, please," Rebecca said, her patience wearing thin but her voice remaining controlled. Tyler shrugged again and began gathering the boxes, muttering under his breath about people with more money than sense. As he stacked the boxes on the counter, he continued his commentary. "You know, ma'am, if you really want to improve your shooting, what you probably need is some basic instruction. There are beginner classes at the range every Saturday morning. Might be more helpful than expensive ammunition." The suggestion was delivered with the same patronizing tone that had characterized the entire interaction. Tyler was now openly treating Rebecca like someone who needed remedial education in firearms handling. Rebecca reached for her wallet, a simple black leather folder that had served her for 15 years. As she opened it to retrieve her credit card, She had to push up the sleeve of her cardigan slightly to access the wallet's contents more easily. That's when Tyler saw it. On Rebecca's wrist, small but unmistakable, was a tattoo of the Purple Heart medal. The distinctive purple and gold design was immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with military decorations. It wasn't large, maybe 1.5 inches across, but it was clearly visible as Rebecca's sleeve shifted. Tyler's expression changed instantly. The smirk vanished. His casual arrogance evaporated. He stared at the tattoo, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. The Purple Heart wasn't a decoration people got for showing up or completing basic training. It was awarded exclusively to service members who had been wounded or killed in combat with enemy forces. It represented blood, sacrifice, and survival under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. Tyler's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The woman he'd been condescending to for the past 10 minutes was a combat veteran who had been injured in the line of duty. Rebecca noticed Tyler's sudden silence and the way his eyes had fixed on her wrist. She glanced down at the exposed tattoo, then back at Tyler's face, which had gone pale. "The ammunition," Rebecca said quietly, extending her credit card. Tyler took the card with hands that trembled slightly. As he processed the payment, his mind raced with questions and realizations. How badly had she been wounded? Where had she served? What had she experienced that earned her one of the military's most sobering decorations? The two customers who had been watching the interaction had also noticed Tyler's dramatic change in demeanor. The man in the camouflage cap moved closer to the counter, trying to understand what had shifted the atmosphere so suddenly. Tyler completed the transaction in silence, his previous chatty condescension replaced by uncomfortable quiet. When the receipt printed, he tore it off and handed it to Rebecca along with her credit card. "Ma'am," Tyler began, his voice now uncertain and much quieter, I didn't realize." Rebecca took her credit card and receipt, then looked directly at Tyler for the first time since entering the store. Her eyes held a mixture of disappointment and understanding that was more powerful than any anger could have been. "You didn't realize what?" Rebecca asked calmly. "That people aren't always what they appear to be. That experience comes in different forms. That respect shouldn't depend on knowing someone's background." Tyler swallowed hard, realizing the full scope of his mistake. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed." "No," Rebecca interrupted gently, "you shouldn't have. But the lesson here isn't about my service record. It's about treating people with dignity regardless of what you think you know about them." She picked up her bag of ammunition, 4 boxes that represented nearly $200 worth of precision rounds that she knew exactly how to use. "The match-grade ammunition I bought," Rebecca continued, her voice steady and educational rather than accusatory. "I use it because I can consistently hit targets at distances that would surprise you. Not because I'm trying to impress anyone, but because that's what my training taught me to do." Tyler nodded mutely, his earlier confidence completely deflated. Rebecca paused at the counter, considering her next words carefully. "I earned this tattoo in Fallujah in 2004. An IED explosion injured 3 members of my unit. I was the medic who treated them under fire while calling in their evacuation. The shrapnel that hit me while I was working on them earned me the Purple Heart." The store had gone completely silent. The two customers stood motionless, absorbing what they were hearing. Tyler felt a knot forming in his stomach as he realized the magnitude of his misjudgment. "But," Rebecca continued, "that's not why I deserve your respect. I deserve your respect because I'm a customer making a legitimate purchase. Just like every other person who walks through that door." She adjusted her purse on her shoulder and looked around the store, then back at Tyler. "The next time an elderly person, or a woman, or anyone who doesn't fit your idea of what a serious shooter looks like comes in here, remember this conversation. Remember that you have no idea what experiences people carry with them." Tyler managed to nod, his throat tight with embarrassment and newfound respect. "Thank you for the ammunition," Rebecca said politely, then turned and walked toward the door. As she reached the exit, the man in the camouflage cap stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, his voice respectful and humble, "thank you for your service." Rebecca paused and smiled, the first genuine smile she'd shown since entering the store. "Thank you," she replied simply, then pushed through the door and walked to her car. Tyler stood behind the counter in the sudden quiet of the store, staring at the space where Rebecca had been. The casual afternoon had become a profound lesson in humility, respect, and the danger of assumptions. The customer in the camouflage cap approached the counter, his expression serious. "Son," the man said quietly, "that woman you just disrespected is more of a warrior than most people will ever be. The Purple Heart means she bled for her country. The fact that she handled your ignorance with that much class means she's got more character than you showed her." Tyler nodded, unable to find words adequate to respond. "You might want to think about how you treat people," the man continued. "Because you never know who you're talking to." Rebecca sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine, allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had just occurred. The interaction at the gun store wasn't unique. She'd faced similar assumptions and dismissive attitudes countless times since retiring from military service 12 years earlier, but something about Tyler's arrogant certainty that she couldn't possibly know what she was talking about had struck deeper than usual. Maybe it was because she'd been having a good day, feeling strong and confident, only to be reminded that in many people's eyes, she was just an old woman who didn't belong in spaces they considered their domain. Rebecca started her car and began the drive home, her mind drifting back to the experiences that had shaped her, the training that had made her one of the most skilled marksmen in her unit, and the injury that had earned her the tattoo Tyler had finally noticed. She thought about the irony of the situation, Tyler questioning her need for precision ammunition when she'd been trained to make shots that could mean the difference between life and death for American soldiers. The match-grade rounds she'd purchased weren't for hobby shooting or impressing anyone. They were for maintaining skills that had once kept people alive. The tattoo on Rebecca's wrist told a story that Tyler couldn't have known, but that didn't excuse his assumptions. The Purple Heart she'd earned represented one of the worst days of her military career, but also one of her finest moments as a medic and a soldier. It was March 15, 2004, in Fallujah, Iraq. Rebecca Torres was a staff sergeant and combat medic attached to a Marine infantry unit conducting urban patrols in one of the most dangerous areas of the city. She'd been in Iraq for 8 months, long enough to become seasoned but not long enough to become careless. The patrol that day was routine, checking in with local contacts, assessing security conditions, and maintaining American presence in a neighborhood that had been relatively quiet for several weeks. Rebecca carried her medical gear along with her standard combat load, ready to treat casualties or defend her position as the situation demanded. The IED was buried under a pile of rubble that looked like countless other debris piles scattered throughout the war-torn city. When the lead vehicle triggered the explosive device, the blast sent shrapnel and debris flying in all directions, wounding 3 Marines and temporarily disorienting the entire patrol. In the confusion that followed the explosion, Rebecca's training took over. Despite the ringing in her ears and the disorientation from the blast, she immediately began moving toward the wounded Marines, assessing their injuries and calling for evacuation support over the radio. The first Marine had taken shrapnel in his leg, a serious wound but not immediately life-threatening. The second had been knocked unconscious by the blast wave, showing signs of a concussion but breathing steadily. The third Marine, however, had suffered a serious chest wound that was bleeding heavily and threatening his airway. As Rebecca worked to stabilize the most critically injured Marine, enemy fire began coming from nearby buildings. The rest of the patrol took defensive positions, but Rebecca remained exposed in the middle of the street, focused entirely on keeping her patient alive. It was while she was inserting a chest tube to prevent the Marine's lung from collapsing that the second explosive device detonated. A smaller IED, triggered remotely by insurgents who had been watching the American response to the first blast. The second explosion sent a piece of twisted metal into Rebecca's left shoulder, tearing through her body armor and embedding itself near her collarbone. The pain was immediate and intense, but Rebecca didn't stop working. With blood soaking her uniform and her left arm barely functional, Rebecca completed the chest tube insertion, administered pain medication, and continued calling for medical evacuation over the radio. She treated all 3 wounded Marines while under intermittent enemy fire, refusing to seek cover or treatment for her own injuries until the evacuation helicopter arrived. The helicopter crew later said they'd never seen a medic continue working with injuries as serious as Rebecca's. The shrapnel had missed major arteries by millimeters, and she'd lost enough blood that she nearly passed out as they loaded the last wounded Marine into the aircraft. Rebecca spent 2 weeks in a military hospital, underwent surgery to remove the shrapnel, and returned to duty with limited mobility in her left shoulder. The Purple Heart citation commended her for conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty while serving as a combat medic with a Marine infantry unit engaged in combat operations against enemy forces. But for Rebecca, the medal represented the Marines whose lives she'd helped save that day. 2 of them made full recoveries. The third, the one with the chest wound, required additional 3 days. After her first visit, Rebecca returned to Davidson's gun store. She'd been thinking about Tyler and the lesson that had unfolded there, wondering if the young man had reflected on their interaction or simply dismissed it as an isolated incident. This time, she wore a light jacket that covered her tattoo, curious to see how Tyler would treat her without the visual reminder of her military service. Tyler was behind the counter when she entered, and Rebecca could see him stiffen slightly as he recognized her. His previous casualness was gone, replaced by nervous uncertainty about how to interact with her. "Ma'am," Tyler said as she approached the counter, his voice much more respectful than during their first encounter. "Hello, Tyler," Rebecca said, noting his surprise that she remembered his name from his name tag. "How can I help you today?" Tyler asked, his tone careful and professional. "I wanted to see how you were doing," Rebecca replied, a response that clearly caught Tyler off guard. Tyler hesitated, unsure how to respond to what seemed like genuine concern from someone he'd treated poorly just days earlier. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Tyler admitted. "About the assumptions I made. I owe you an apology." Rebecca nodded appreciatively. "I'm listening." Tyler took a deep breath. "I judged you based on your appearance, your age, and your gender. I assumed you didn't know what you were talking about, and I treated you like you were ignorant or confused. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." "What made you realize it was wrong?" Rebecca asked, genuinely curious about Tyler's thought process. "Honestly," Tyler said, "at first, it was seeing your tattoo. Finding out you were a combat veteran made me realize I'd completely misjudged who you were." Rebecca waited for him to continue. "But then I started thinking about it more," Tyler said, "and I realized that I shouldn't have treated you that way regardless of your military service. You were a customer making a legitimate purchase, and you clearly knew what you wanted. I had no right to be condescending just because you didn't fit my idea of what a typical ammunition customer looks like." Rebecca smiled. "That's exactly right. What changed your perspective?" Tyler looked around the store, gathering his thoughts. "I went home and told my dad about what happened. He's a veteran too, Navy, Vietnam era. He was pretty disappointed in me." Tyler paused, then continued. "But he also said something that stuck with me. He said that respect isn't something people have to earn based on their background or accomplishments. It's something everyone deserves as a basic human courtesy." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Rebecca said. "He is. And he made me realize that even if you hadn't been a veteran, even if you had been just a grandmother who wanted to try precision shooting, I still should have treated you with respect and helped you find what you needed." Rebecca felt a sense of satisfaction hearing Tyler articulate the lesson she'd hoped he would learn. "He's right," she said. "Military service, or any other accomplishment, doesn't make someone more deserving of basic respect. It just makes the disrespect more obviously inappropriate." Tyler nodded, clearly understanding the distinction. "I've been working here for 8 months, Tyler said, "and I've probably made assumptions about other customers too. People I thought were too young, too old, too inexperienced, or just not the type to be serious about firearms. What are you going to do differently?" Rebecca asked. "Listen more, assume less," Tyler replied. "Ask questions to understand what people need instead of deciding what I think they need based on how they look." Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a small card, a business card from the local shooting range where she volunteered as an instructor. "I teach precision shooting classes on weekends," she said, handing Tyler the card. "If you'd like to learn more about long-range marksmanship, you're welcome to join us." Tyler took the card, examining it with interest. You teach shooting? I do. I've found that sharing skills is a good way to stay connected to something I've always valued. And it helps other people develop confidence in ability. I'd like that, Tyler said. I think I could learn a lot. Rebecca smiled. Good. Class starts at 9 a.m. on Saturdays. Bring an open mind and leave the assumptions at home. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect conditions for outdoor shooting instruction. Rebecca arrived at Cedar Falls shooting range an hour early, as was her habit, to set up targets and prepare equipment for the day's lesson. Tyler appeared in the parking lot at 8:45 a.m., carrying a rifle case and looking nervous but determined. He'd spent the week thinking about precision shooting, reading articles online, and wondering what he'd learned from someone whose skills had been developed under combat conditions. Good morning, Tyler, Rebecca called out as he approached the range entrance. Morning, ma'am, Tyler replied. I'm excited to be here, but I'll admit I'm a little nervous. Good, Rebecca said. A little nervousness means you're taking it seriously. That's the right attitude for handling firearms. The shooting range was a well-maintained facility with lanes extending out to 300 yards, perfect for the precision work Rebecca taught. Several other students had already arrived, a mix of ages and backgrounds, including 2 other military veterans, a competitive shooter looking to improve her technique, and a father-son pair who wanted to develop better hunting accuracy. Rebecca began the class with safety protocols, even though most of the students were experienced shooters. She emphasized that precision shooting required even more attention to safety details because of the distances and power involved. Precision shooting, Rebecca explained as the class gathered around a table displaying various rifles and optics, is about consistency, patience, and understanding the relationship between equipment, environment, and technique. She picked up a rifle similar to the one she'd used in the military. The equipment matters: quality rifles, precision ammunition, properly adjusted scopes. But the most important component is the person behind the rifle. Tyler listened intently as Rebecca explained breathing techniques, trigger control, and body positioning. Her instruction was clear, patient, and methodical, completely different from the dismissive treatment he'd given her in the gun store. Tyler, Rebecca said as the class moved to the firing line, what type of ammunition did you bring today? Standard .308, Tyler replied. The kind I tried to sell you in the store. Rebecca nodded. That's perfectly fine for learning. As you develop better technique, you'll start to notice the difference that match-grade ammunition can make. But for now, focus on the fundamentals. The class spent the morning working on basic precision techniques at 100 yards. Rebecca moved from student to student, offering individual guidance and corrections. When she reached Tyler's position, she watched him fire several shots, then knelt beside him. Your breathing is good, she said, but you're rushing the trigger pull. Precision shooting requires patience. Take your time between shots. Tyler followed her guidance, and his next group of shots showed immediate improvement. Better, Rebecca said. Now I want you to understand something about that match-grade ammunition you questioned in the store. She walked to her own shooting position and loaded her rifle with the same ammunition she'd purchased from Tyler. At 100 yards, her target showed a tight group of holes clustered within an area smaller than a quarter. Standard hunting ammunition would give me a group about 3 times that size, Rebecca explained. For hunting deer at normal ranges, that difference doesn't matter much. But for precision work, or for longer distances, the quality of the ammunition becomes critical. Tyler studied Rebecca's target, beginning to understand the technical aspects of what she'd been trying to purchase. Ma'am, Tyler said, can I ask you something personal? Of course. In the store, when I was being... Tyler struggled to find the right word. Condescending? Rebecca suggested with a slight smile. Yeah. Condescending? Rebecca suggested with a slight smile. Yeah. When I was being condescending, why didn't you just tell me about your military background right away? It would have shut me up immediately. Rebecca considered the question while adjusting her rifle scope. Because my military service isn't what makes me deserving of respect, Tyler. And if I have to prove my credentials every time someone makes assumptions about me, I'm essentially accepting their premise that some people deserve better treatment than others. She looked at Tyler directly. I'd rather teach people to treat everyone with respect from the beginning. It's a more important lesson than just getting better service for myself. As the morning progressed, Rebecca moved the class to longer ranges, 200 yards, then 300 yards. At these distances, the difference in skill levels became more apparent, and the value of quality equipment and ammunition became clear. Tyler struggled with the longer distances, but Rebecca patiently guided him through the adjustments needed for successful long-range shooting. By the end of the class, he was hitting targets consistently at 200 yards, a significant improvement from his starting point. Mrs. Torres, Tyler said as the class wrapped up, I have to ask, what's the longest shot you've ever made? Rebecca packed up her equipment thoughtfully. In training, I qualified at 800 yards. In combat situations, the longest confirmed hit was about 650 yards. The other students had gathered around, interested in hearing about Rebecca's military experience. That's incredible, said the competitive shooter. What kind of conditions were you dealing with? Wind, heat, stress, and people shooting back at me, Rebecca replied matter-of-factly. It changes your perspective on what constitutes challenging shooting conditions. Tyler shook his head in amazement. And I was trying to explain basic ammunition to you. Rebecca laughed, a genuine, warm sound. Tyler, everyone starts somewhere. The important thing isn't what you didn't know before. It's what you're willing to learn going forward. Word of what happened at Davidson's gun store began to spread through Cedar Falls' small firearms community. The story took on different forms as it passed from person to person, sometimes emphasizing Rebecca's military credentials, sometimes focusing on Tyler's transformation, sometimes highlighting the broader lesson about assumptions and respect. Tyler found himself thinking differently about every customer interaction. He began asking open-ended questions instead of making assumptions, listening more carefully to what people said they needed, and treating every person who entered the store as someone who might surprise him. The changes were noticed by his manager, Dave Davidson, who owned the store his grandfather had founded in 1952. Dave had built the business on principles of customer service and community respect, and he was pleased to see Tyler developing a more professional approach to customer interactions. Tyler's really grown into the job, Dave told his wife over dinner one evening. Whatever happened with that lady who came in last week, it really seemed to change his perspective on how to treat customers. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued her weekend shooting instruction, finding satisfaction in teaching others the skills she developed over years of military service. The classes grew in size as word spread about her expertise and teaching ability. Several of her students were law enforcement officers looking to improve their long-range capabilities. Others were competitive shooters seeking to refine their technique. A few were veterans like herself, finding community and purpose in maintaining skills they'd learned in service to their country. But perhaps the most rewarding student was Tyler, who attended every Saturday class and gradually developed into a skilled precision shooter. More importantly, he carried the lessons about respect and open-mindedness back to his work at the gun store. 3 months after her first visit to Davidson's gun store, Rebecca received an unexpected phone call from Dave Davidson. Mrs. Torres, Dave said, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Tyler, who told me about what happened in my store a few months ago. Rebecca was curious about the purpose of the call. What can I do for you, Mr. Davidson? Well, Tyler told me how he treated you during your first visit, and how you handled the situation with such class. He also told me about the shooting lessons you've been giving him and how much he's learned from you. Dave paused, then continued. I've been thinking about expanding our services to include professional shooting instruction, and Tyler suggested I talk to you about possibly teaching classes here at the store. Rebecca was intrigued. What kind of classes did you have in mind? Precision shooting, long-range techniques, maybe some tactical applications for law enforcement. Tyler says you have experience that most civilian instructors don't have. Rebecca considered the offer. Teaching at the gun store would allow her to reach more people, and it would create an interesting full-circle conclusion to her experience with Tyler. "I'd be interested," Rebecca said. "But I have some conditions." "Name them." "The classes have to be open to everyone regardless of age, gender, or background. No assumptions about who can or can't learn precision shooting." Dave laughed. "I think Tyler's already learned that lesson." "Anything else?" "I want part of the proceeds to go to a veterans support organization. Teaching these skills is important, but supporting other veterans is more important." "Done," Dave said immediately. "When can you start?" 6 months after Rebecca first walked into Davidson's gun store, she stood behind the same counter where Tyler had dismissed her, preparing for her first official precision shooting class hosted by the store. Tyler, now the store's assistant manager, had worked with Dave to convert the back room into a classroom suitable for instruction. Charts showing ballistics data covered the walls, and a table displayed various rifles and optics that would be used in the practical portions of the class. The first class was sold out, 20 students ranging from law enforcement officers to competitive shooters to curious hobbyists. Rebecca looked out at the diverse group and felt satisfied that her conditions about inclusivity had been respected. "Welcome to Precision Shooting Fundamentals," Rebecca began. "Before we talk about equipment or techniques, I want to establish something important. Everyone in this room is capable of learning these skills. Success depends on dedication, practice, and an open mind, not on age, gender, or background." Tyler, who was assisting with the class, smiled as he recognized the lesson Rebecca had taught him being passed on to a new group of students. The class covered everything from basic marksmanship principles to advanced techniques for long-range shooting. Rebecca shared insights from her military experience, explaining how combat conditions had shaped her approach to precision shooting and how those lessons applied to civilian applications. During the break, one of the students, a young woman who was new to shooting sports, approached Rebecca with a question. "Mrs. Torres, I have to admit I was intimidated about taking this class. Some of the guys at work said precision shooting wasn't really something women could excel at." Rebecca looked at the young woman thoughtfully. "What's your name?" "Jessica." "Jessica, let me tell you something I learned early in my military career. The rifle doesn't care about your gender, your age, or anyone else's opinions about what you can accomplish. It only responds to proper technique, patience, and practice." Rebecca gestured toward the targets they'd been using for practice. "Look at your shots from this morning. You're already grouping better than half the men in the class. That's not because of anything special about you or them, it's because you're listening, learning, and applying what you've been taught." Jessica nodded, looking more confident. "Don't let other people's assumptions limit what you think you can achieve, Rebecca.